So, you know, a lot of people ask, say, hey, can I put a competitor shoe on the Johnny Glock's Evolution kit? And my question and my standard answer is like, yes, you can, but you're going to lose efficiency. And so, and this isn't me, you know, this is factual, all right? So this is not me saying Apex is good or bad or whatever. In fact, I appreciate Apex for their safety and their reliability. But as far as their performance, it's about the same as a Glock. And the way I'm going to kind of show you this is like, here's a Glock OEM bar. You can see it has this type of movement in it right there. When I put this up against the Apex, you can see how these trigger bars basically line up the same way as far as pre-travel is concerned. So you're going to be sitting in the trigger guard in the exact same place as you would with a stock Glock with the Apex shoe. Now we'll contrast that against the Johnny Glock trigger, and you'll see when we do the exact same test and you look from that angle right there, you can see it's a substantial difference in pre-travel reduction from the Glock and from the Apex. So when I say it's not going to be as efficient, that's what I mean. You're going to have less pre-travel to overcome. Not that pre-travel is like a total huge thing. We don't do it really to give you like an advantage to get the shot off quicker. We do it more or less so your finger lands on the shoe in a better position. Sometimes with the Glock, it's almost like with the curved shoe, it's fine because you know when you're reaching out, you're going to land, you're going to nestle. You're going to nestle in that curve, right? That, you know, you're going to nestle in the curve. But with a flat shoe, if you're doing the same test, what's going to happen is you're going to kind of smack it right there, and it's not the exact same. It doesn't have the curve to it, so it's kind of like, in my opinion, if this shoe sat back further like that, when you go to do it, you're going to land on top of it like that. So that's why we do that with this trigger and we do the rounded, the convex edges is because we want you to wrap right on it. And so you can see that's why I kind of morphed that edge right there on the OEM shoe onto a flat profile. You can see it right there. It's the exact same kind of idea. So when you land on it, you're just nestling right against there, but it's a flat shoe and it's metal, so it's got a nice articulation. So that's the pre-travel thing. Now, the over-travel, the thing that stops a Glock from over traveling is the bar is actually, there's a couple different areas that it actually stop. I wish I had okay, what we do, we rarely have stock triggers in guns. So when this trigger is disengaged, what's actually happening is the back of the trigger bar is it's maxing out on the connector. So it stops right there. That's what stops it. And that's why you have a jump after the break, because the trigger's actually braking about right there, and then it jumps. And then what stops it, like I said, it's actually two things. You can see where this is actually hitting right there. It's not going to go any further than that because the right angle in that trigger bar, you see it hit the polymer right there. Mm-hmm. So there's two places it's actually kind of being stopped. So that's the over travel of a Glock that is stopped kind of by the frame a little bit, but more like you'll never see a frame that has markings right there because right before that happens, it's stopping right back there. And then your reset happens like that, and that's where your trigger bar comes back up and you go back into reset. So stop there, break, back into reset. So when you're contrasting that against a Johnny Glock trigger, now, and that's a really good indicator right there too. So let's look at the space. Let's look at this space right here. That's an OEM trigger. You're almost slapped right up against that metal right there. I mean polymer. Like I could probably not get it this jeweler's in there. Now I can't see. Now if I let it go, I can get it down in there. But once I pull that trigger, there's no more space in between those two things for me to get down there. Now with our trigger, you'll see once the trigger breaks, look at the space right there. I can put more than that in there because now the bar is being limited. And that amount of brake stoppage, as opposed to all the way back at the end of the day, translates to a trigger that has no over travel.
Okay, so the bottom one's OEM, and then the top one is Johnny Glock's.
Right, right. So you can see the space there, and you can see the lack of space there. And so now if I'll do this quick. And what's stopping the Johnny Glock trigger bar is either A, the set screw, or B, the limitation that we have right there. So if I would take a Glock bar and you would see all this movement back and forth and how it almost goes all the way to the back of the shoe right there, all that movement right there, you just don't have that on ours. It's minimized. So basically, this is not an apples to apple kind of thing, but if we would, mic these two out, what am I going to let's do ours. It's right about there. And then we'll do the opening in the Glocks. I'm not even going to use numbers. I'm just doing the opening. So I'm going to hold these two calipers up next to each other. That's about it right there. You can see the difference.
Twice as big.
Big difference. That's a big difference. And now if you think of the same space with a Apex, look, there's nothing stopping it. So that's where you're losing performance too. And like I said, this isn't a bash on Apex. This is just facts. You know what I mean? You don't have anything limiting this. And so it's going to function in this gun exactly the same way. It's going to have the exact same pre-travel and the exact same reset length that a Glock has. So yeah, you have a metal shoe, and you know what they'll say, like this limits it right there, that little shelf. But if I quickly throw this into a Glock, which I really have to do this to demonstrate it. Is this, what gen is this? This is I need like a Gen 4 Glock. Hang on a second. This is Gen 5. I know I got a Gen 4 right here. So I'm going to switch this out. To a Gen 4. Use this housing right here. Where's the trigger spring for that housing? All right, right here. So how they say, like the trigger breaks and then that's going to actually stop it right there. But if you look back there, it still translates the same way. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing as the Glock. So yeah, that's stopping it on the frame, but it's not stopping it with any type of efficiency other than what the Glock trigger offers, because once again, you're at the same spot where you cannot fit any type of implement in there. That shows you how much the bar is moving backwards. Where with ours, you have all this space right here. I can even probably let this go and it was sitting there. Well, not actually that much space, but look, I can't get it sitting there because of the nature. But that's way much more space than that. So, when we talk about efficiency, and I know there's guys out there that say, well, I don't change my triggers because A, B, C, and D, you don't need to. It's not, and that's an opinion, it really is. I respect your opinion, that's fine, but you can't argue against the physics behind it. Like the Johnny Glock is a more efficient trigger. You have less movement, which means you have less of a chance for human error. When you get to the wall, when you break through the wall, you have less of a chance of milking the gun because you don't have as much resistance. The shot is not breaking. The shot is, like I said, it's a lighter break. The reset's shorter. There's no over travel, so you have no over travel jump. And then when you go to reset, you're only introducing this much movement into the gun. So 10 times out of 10, you're going to lose that argument. Yeah, that's your opinion. That's fine. That's great. That's your opinion. But you can't, like I said, that break with that amount of reset, with that amount of pre-travel, with that brake over travel, with that amount of reset, it's just more movement. And with more movement, you lose accuracy and you lose speed. Okay, and what is gunfighting about? And what is the competition about? It's about speed and accuracy. So, you know, I get it. I understand there's guys out there that are huge advocates of not changing it, but if you can give yourself, and now you can't drop a Johnny Glock trigger in there and you know, think you're going to be Daniel Horner or something like that, or you know, it's just not, it doesn't happen that way. You have to train. But the point is it going to, you know, if you get to a certain point, you're trying to push yourself a little bit more, yes, it's going to give you an advantage. It has to, you know what I mean? It's just physically giving you an advantage. So as much as I respect, you know, what people have to say, I know what's his name, Ben Stoker is a big component of this shoe, but once again, it's not as efficient as a Johnny Glock shoe. And there's some, I think there's I don't know. I can't say my shoe is the most efficient. I can tell you this, my shoe is the most efficient and safe, because there's a lot out there that they're pushing the threshold, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're safe, you know. And that's why I do all those show live all the safety tests and checks and drop guns and throw guns and stuff like that, so you know without a doubt you're safe, because that's more important than performance. If you don't have that piece, then you know, you're not being a responsible gun owner and you're putting everyone in jeopardy. And we've seen that before. If anyone has ever been privy to a negligent discharge that has ended in injury or even fatality, you get a very, very different mindset on this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? You don't get that like, hey, you just want to go to the range. And I've had guys like say, hey, can I get rid of the trigger safety tab? And I'm like, no, you cannot get rid of that. Don't file it. Don't do any of this stuff that you're watching on YouTube, because you're putting yourself at risk. You're putting everyone around you at risk. It's not responsible. It's not accountable. But, you know, there's people that are going to do it because they have not seen that cold, stark moment when you got 10 seconds to put a tourniquet on someone's femur because they're bleeding through their pants. Like they're dying. You know what I mean? They're dying because of, you know, it might have been a negligent discharge or an accidental discharge, operator caused, but you know, that's not always the case. We see them all the time from faulty equipment. And once you've seen that, or once you've done it yourself, you will never be the same unless you're a complete and total moron or sociopath or something like that, because it should impact you in a very, very scary way. In fact, you guys can leave that in the comments if you've ever done that or if you've ever seen that or anything like that. You know, let people know that haven't had that experience, like, hey, this is real. People die. People lose limbs. I've talked to people on the phone. I've tried to help them with you know, civil cases where like they have lost a leg. You know what I mean? They have been in the hospital for months and months and months and months and months rehabbing from a bullet lodged in their femur. I mean, it's a firearm. You know what I mean? It's not whatever Rainbow Siege 6 or whatever the heck else those games. It's like the real deal, man. It's not airsoft. You know, so. But I would love to hear that actually in the comments. If anyone out there has experienced a negligent discharge themselves or seen one that, I hope I don't have hearing about a fatality, but like injuries, we've seen fatalities before. It is brutal. And that's why we here at this company, it's number one. No trigger goes out this door that isn't tested. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal because we've seen the ramifications of it. So, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. You know, I said we were going to throw some cell phone stuff back out at you, make it real formal, and so you know, that's what we're doing. So if you don't, you know, I forget what percentage of people subscribe. It's crazy. I have like what 5 million views, over 5 million views, but like maybe 60,000. I don't know. But if you like the content, do us a favor and subscribe and share and like and hit that notification bell and all that kind of stuff I'm supposed to say that I get yelled at if I don't say. And check us out on Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And remember, trigger control is control.